A slightly different angle for the garden Q&A on the side of the porch here. I would like to film a little more in the front garden, but a lot of times when I'm shooting video, the sun is, the front gets sun most of the day, and I'm just a little late getting to it or whatever. Or I have to wait so late in the day that I'm out in the front garden as everyone's getting home from work, talking to the camera. But I think this is a pretty good angle over on the side of the garden, up under the native redbud here and beside a hydrangea that's in full bloom. Let's see, if you are interested in getting t-shirts for Father's Day next weekend, we probably need those orders sooner than later. I think there were like 3 this week that we could kind of tell were Father's Day gifts. So if you're interested in t-shirts, they're over on the website. And speaking of t-shirts, this is one of them here, the Conifer Collector t-shirt. There will be a special t-shirt for the open garden. We actually have an open garden t-shirt that we've ordered, and looks good. I'm hoping that that folks will be interested in having some sort of memento from having come to the open garden, which is on, I think there are just a handful of tickets left for the Friday evening spot and a few for the Saturday afternoon spot. All the Saturday morning tickets are gone, and a lot of tickets sold this past week. There are very few. Very limited number left at this point, but it's 2, as you're watching this, 2 Fridays from now when the open garden event is. I'm going to go through just a couple details real quick on it. Again, I want to do this every week because I'm getting questions via email, but I'm putting all the answers at the beginning of these Q&A videos, hoping different people will watch different Q&As over the course of a month or so. So real quickly, we're at 709 Harris Street in Raleigh, North Carolina. The Juniper Level Botanic Garden will be open all day on Friday, morning and after, all day. So you can go over and visit it. Plants will be for sale there. If you want to purchase plants while you're there, you don't have to. There's about 8 acres garden over there that is just one of the top gardens you can see in the country. And then if you have the tickets, you'll be here in our garden either the Friday evening, Saturday morning, or Saturday afternoon that next day. Parking on our street is pretty limited because we're on a dead-end road, so please save those spots on our street for anybody who may need to park closer to the garden for whatever reason. We have a lot of surrounding parking throughout the neighborhood. Let's see. Again, the exclusive open garden t-shirt. I'm excited about that. I waited till the very last minute, of course, but they will be here in time. There are lots of giveaways. We have plants from the Southern Living Plant Collection coming this next week. Encore Azaleas, possibly some candy butterfly bushes, Soil3 Compost, Pro Pluggers. Pro Plugger sent us a Pro Plugger for each of the 3 open garden time slots, so there'll be one of those for each. We've dug up and divided some special things from this garden too that will be part of those giveaways. Make sure you get questions to us for this next week. Next Sunday's garden question and answer video, I'm probably gonna have to shoot like Monday after you're watching this one on Sunday. So if you have questions for next week, go ahead and ask them in the comment section below this video, because I have an event later in the week, the Garden Symposium. I'm speaking at the Garden Symposium, and I have people coming from out of town and all over the place, and there's lots of events around that event, and so I'm unavailable like 3 days of the week to get work done. So I'm trying to get it done sooner than later. So ask questions early. We'd love to answer them. I think there's 25 from this past week. And also one other quick thing, and I promise we're about to get to some questions. I created, for those of you who have never bought the Weekly Garden Planner or the Learn to Garden video series, I put a combo pricing on the website. So if you go over to HortTube.com, you'll see, you can either go up to shop or you can see on the main page there, there is now a combo price if you want both the Learn to Garden video series and the Weekly Garden Planner together. Okay, and if you haven't bought either of them, then that's an opportunity to get both at one time. Okay, here we go. Is it wise to leave plants in containers in zone 8A and wait till fall to plant because heat is coming? They were specifically asking about a red bud they got on clearance at Lowe's. I continue to plant things. I would continue to plant things based on how things are going. So like right now, we have high humidity, which is a big time plus for actually putting plants in the ground. Not fun for working in it for sure. But for the plants, they're able to breathe through their leaves, breathe through the air just like they can from the soil. And so high humidity is a good thing. We have temperatures that are probably below our normal averages. I think our average temperature by this time in June is 90 degrees, and we haven't hit 90, and we are in the next few days, but we haven't hit 90. We had 90s back in April and haven't had any during hardly any in May, and so far in June. So, and we've had rain. So that combination of humidity, moist soils, if you have a similar situation going on, I'm going to continue to plant. If you're asking me from the northern part of the country, you'd be much better off planting it now. You know, the sooner the better. And you can plant right through the summer. I plant 12 months out of the year here. Even if the conditions weren't as I described, you know, perfectly perfect, I would still be planting. But I think for a lot of us here in the Southeast right this minute, we have slightly cooler, high humidity, moisture in the soil. I feel like you put it in the ground, if it were me. Let's see. If a plant is troubled by winter wetness, would container planting it be a better option? So, i.e. agapanthus, lamandra, daphne. So some of the plants that just don't like wet feet in general. So with agapanthus, they not only do they don't like winter wet, they also like their roots confined a bit. So growing them in containers will oftentimes give you quite a few flowers. Unfortunately, it gets so root bound. If you've ever pulled an agapanthus out of a container, they'll deform the container. The roots are really thick, and it will become a watering nightmare in time, potentially. So just throwing that out there. But having their roots confined is something they do like. With the lamandra, same thing. Again, lamandra is not that cold hardy though. So if I was here in Raleigh and I was trying to test whether a lamandra would survive the winter here, in a container, it's definitely not, because that's going to expose those roots to really cold temperatures. So I'm better putting it in the ground and trying to create some sharp drainage in the ground with some sort of expanded slate or pine bark or whatever, or mounding it up, putting it in some situation where the roots would stay warm. Daphne, I killed just as many Daphne in containers as you do in the ground. I killed thousands of Daphne in containers in my nursery, so I don't know that you get anything out of leaving them in containers. I think a few long-lived Daphne over at the Ralston are planted in raised beds with super sharp drainage where they're using expanded slate to create the drainage, and it's also in a raised bed. So there's just no way they're going to be overwatered under there. But there's some really nice Daphne specimens, interesting variegations over at the Ralston that have lived a little longer than I see them typically live in most gardens. So I think in the ground is best. Raised up, sharp drainage, you know, is probably better at the end of the day. It's easy to overwater them in containers, actually. What do we do to the garden, if anything, as we prepare to travel? So, you know, Steph and I travel quite a bit, you know, filming things for this channel, and just, you know, we enjoy traveling in general. I initially started putting in drip irrigation in this entire project, and then I just was like, I don't want to maintain that. Drip irrigation may end up being more maintenance than just figuring out the watering some other way. And so I didn't follow through on the drip irrigation. It's out here. I've laid some of the line out here under these beds, and so that I could hook it in later if I wanted to. But we actually we'll typically gather our containers together in a part shady space, water them well, and then ask someone to come over and water them a couple times while we're gone, check the mail, that kind of thing, is our main strategy. In the ground, we will, if it's dry leading up to us leaving, we'll try to water the entire place as well as possible, and then we just cross our fingers. Most everything out here now is. We've done a lot of planting this spring, so I don't want to say everything, but most of the things here have been in the ground for 2 years or more now. We've improved this soil a lot. They seem to be going through longer periods of ups and downs a little bit better than they were a couple of years ago. So just not going to worry about it all that much. I need to get my containers watered. Another strategy we've used is planting the things from the containers in our vegetable garden while we've been gone. That strategy's worked pretty well. If you're going, you know, after the vegetable garden's done in the fall, if we're traveling later than that, we'll just plant the shrubs directly in the vegetable garden and just leave them, put them back in the containers later. Great strategy. And then we typically, I don't necessarily travel for long periods of time in peak July. That would be the time, you know, that's this kind of June. We're not traveling now because we're getting the garden ready for the open garden event. And then we just kind of stick around, maybe short tripping it until a little later in the summer. So not necessarily leaving peak summer with this kind of amount of material. Okay, let's see. Is it okay to deadhead crepe myrtles to prevent pesky seedlings? So some people will get seedlings under their crepe myrtles, most don't get seedlings. They'll get suckering down at the under the roots sometimes, especially if we're cutting the tops back big time on them in the wintertime, crepe murdering them. Would deadheading them help prevent some of those pesky seedlings? Definitely, and that's true with everything. And I want to point this out about invasive plants. In tomorrow's video, as you're watching this, we do a walk around walk that I always have taken Holly and Griffin on, now me and Griffin, but we went and filmed some of the things, and some of them are a lot of invasives on this block that we live on, and I talk about in that video. Tomorrow that you're going to see, anything that you can cut the seed heads off that you don't want to seed is a good idea. So if you've got annuals that seed themselves, you know, you can be deadheading them during the season before they form that seed fully. If you've got ligustrum you're using as a hedge and you don't want ligustrum seedlings everywhere, you can prune those off after they flower. And yes, with something like crepe myrtles, yes, same exact thing. And you probably have enough time as they fade that you could potentially get a small amount of flowering to kind of reflower from that deadheading on those crepe myrtles. More so on a vitex than a crepe myrtle. Let's see. Are homes hard to sell with elaborate gardens? Sometimes that was probably the case, but interesting, a lot of times that if people aren't into gardening, they're just there to see the house. You know, I think if you got rid of all your lawn like we did, and that person's coming with young kids, they may look at that as, you know, where are we going to put the lawn back in, kind of a thing. The people that bought my old house though, they weren't gardeners. It was a young family. That area, you know, out in the suburbs of Raleigh here on the edge of Johnston, between Johnston County and Wake County, is kind of a place for a lot of young families. A lot of new elementary schools, middle schools, high schools in that area over the last 20 years. It's one of those areas. And I think that's what they were looking for, you know, as much as anything. And I think they just looked past the garden and the fact that they weren't going to be maintaining it overall. I don't think for most people it probably matters all that much. But for some, maybe, you know, if they're just anti-gardening, there are a lot of folks that move into houses as investments, I think, and leave apartment living, and then run into a lot of maintenance that they don't necessarily want to do. So there's probably is some percentage of buyers that would be turned off by it. I don't know on the scale of this, you know, what anyone's going to think of it. If they came here and it was in absolute peak, you know, and they've never done a lot of garden maintenance or knew, you know, they may think, wow, this is nice, and buy it for this reason, maybe slightly regretting it later. I don't know. I have no idea. But I think someone will match to it if they're interested in the garden, or they're going to come in and they're only interested in how many bathrooms it has and, you know, blah, 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 and they're not even looking hardly outside. Let's see. And for us, it's about location. I mean, this spot right here, we're probably the last people that will live in this house. I mean, you know, most of the houses in this neighborhood get scraped and giant houses go back in their place. Happening a lot in the neighborhood. It's part of the video tomorrow as well. Let's see. Do we ever direct seed into the garden, or use plant seed, or we just use plant seedlings and container plants because of mulch cap? Yeah, we plant into the, we do the seedlings in the house, and then everything else is from a container plant that we buy from somewhere else, or start on our own, or propagate, or whatever. But no, I don't do any direct seeding in the ground here because of the mulch cap. Another thing that's going to be in tomorrow's video, and I'm talking about, is there's a reason that I don't direct seed in this garden. There's too many invasive plants here. So if I was to take let's say I took a 10 by 12 area and I cleared it off, got all the mulch out of there, and I put down compost and I prepped it, and I threw all the seed out that I wanted to come up. Let's say I do it in the late fall, or maybe it's spring things I throw out, whatever it is. I seed that area. Well, I've just exposed this big area. Once I take my rake and kind of rake that seed in just a little bit, I've now set up also the perfect conditions for that English ivy seed and that, you know, the porcelain vine seed and ligustrum and everything else. And so the people who try to do more meadow type gardening in this neighborhood really struggle with it, the amount of weeds that they're going to get in it. So I think it's easier for some other people in other places to do it than an old established neighborhood where the invasive plants have become so seedy. But that's my answer. It's not an answer everybody would like, but it's much harder here just because the amount of competitive things that are going to germinate at the same time your desired seed is germinating. Okay. So somebody wanted a storage shed organization video. Please make that video and share it with me. I say that because ours, it's okay in there. If you went in there, I can find what I'm looking for. I am normally very organized, but this project, between this project and all of our travels and various other things over the last few years, the weird world we lived in with COVID and everything else, I probably haven't done as much in that storage shed as I would like to have everything stored in an organized way. I've got some things I use in the winter that are down on the floor that I should have built a shelf in there by now to kind of switch some things back and forth like we would do with your winter clothes or summer clothes or whatever in the house. I need to do some of those things in that storage shed. So one day I'll shoot a storage shed organization video because I am, in fact, very organized. I had at one time a big shop in my garage at my house, at the nursery, at the garden center, and they were all quite organized because I had to be, because I had shuffling so many things at the time. You really have to be. This, for some reason, I have not been as organized. Let's see. But I've got the 5 or 6 things I use regularly, I do have hanging right when I go in, so I don't have to actually go very far into the shed. How far elevated should we plant plants that don't like wet clay soils? Can you berm the area up with compost and pine fines and have half of the root ball up? Yes, and that's a strategy I used. Landscaping. If I got into an area where it was a lot of tree roots I was competing with, I would build some of that up, not covering all the roots on the trees, but maybe a band going between trees through a wooded space. I'd use compost and pine fines and plant into that. But you have to know that you're going to need some more water for a while until those things root down into the soil. But yes, you can plant half in the ground, half above, use pine fines and compost, and then some sort of thin layer of mulch even over the top of that. And then know that you're going to have to do a little more watering for the first couple of years until they get rooted in. But that is a good strategy to keep them up out of the clay or get them up above some other tree roots that you're competing against. Any way to know if a plant is root bound before you buy it? And then Steph wrote down, or too few roots. Yeah, you can flip the thing upside down. We showed it in a video about better boxwood with Nicholas Stadden out in California from last fall that we shot with him. Just taking one of those better boxwoods and carefully put your hand in there and try to cover up the fertilizer, because a lot of these plants are top dressed with fertilizer. You'll see it sitting right on top of the soil. When you flip it upside down, try not to dump all the fertilizer out. It'll usually be on one side of the container, so I'll usually grab it right there so that the fertilizer's in my hand, and I'll flip the pot over, flip it upside down, take the pot off, look at the roots, and then the main thing for me, I probably don't mind a plant being root bound. It can go way too far, obviously, but if it seems a little root bound, I probably don't mind that. I'm mainly looking for living roots. I mean, this time of year, you should be seeing new root formation in that pot. So even if it's a little pot bound, there still should be some white roots or red roots on a loropetalum, or maybe on some barberries and Mahonia will have yellow roots, and so there should be some healthy root tissue in that container, especially this time of year. You won't see as much of that in the winter for sure, but it shouldn't be brown and kind of squishy roots, because that could be where they overwatered them and they're getting some root rot on them. But you can also find, flipping it over, that there may not be any roots in there at all. And we had a lot of that. We'll see that happen in this business when it really takes off sometimes. When housing gets going, the economy really gets going strong, plants are selling so fast that they're not being replaced fast enough, and they don't get rooted in the pots, and people are selling them. So you can find some plants that don't have good roots on them. We saw this during COVID. Just like any plant that you put out at a garden center, people were grabbing it. Root bound, no roots, this tall, lanky, old plants that they hadn't gotten rid of for 3 years, they all disappeared. So we can see variability in that, in the quality of, you know, how old a plant is or how young a plant is being on the shelf based on, you know, economic conditions. But again, the one thing I'm looking for, the main thing I'm looking for is I don't want any root rot. I'm more scared that the plant got overwatered than anything else. So if I'm examining something, it's just like I don't want to see any kind of rotted root material in that container. If it's a little root bound, I just don't mind it all that much. Some plants will always be root bound. You're probably never going to buy a Vitex that you could pull out of the container and not see that it's fairly root bound. It's just a very aggressive rooting plant, especially in a container. Figs are that way. I mean, we could plant fig cuttings in the spring that were that big. The little root ball was that big, fig was this tall, directly into 3-gallon containers. That, you know, that deep, that big around. And water them regularly like everything else in the nursery. And then by July, those things were so root bound that we were watering that section of the bed twice a day. Just that fast, they can root out in that container. So there's some plants that I think are going to be leaned toward being root bound always. As long as the top of the plant looks like it's in pretty good shape, I'm not going to worry about it. Some of the signs that something is a little too root bound is that it may be a little off color on the top. Fertilizer may be running out on it, may have had it a little bit too long, you know, at the nursery at that point. Some of those things don't bother me all that much. Most of these plants are pretty tough and you can nurse them back to health. Okay. Let's see. But again, root rot is the main thing that I don't want to see in a plant. I can't recover from rotted roots. I can recover from root bound or damaged roots, or under fertilizing, I should say. Okay. So somebody asked what the best kind of mulch is for a sandy slope in Central Florida that will break down quickly to feed the sandy soil. They used the purple bag pine bark that I showed on the channel, putting some bark around our annuals this past week, and it floats away. Yeah, anything the pine bark on a slope is going to float away potentially. I would see if you can find double shred or triple shredded hardwood. It tends to lock in place a little better. You guys will see some mulching videos here this week. As I'm filming this on Friday, I am waiting to hear when my mulch is arriving. It's supposed to be, it's 11 o'clock in the morning right now. Hoping to have mulch here this afternoon so I can get started on it. And it's triple shredded hardwood. If I'm tree forming shrubs, is it a good idea to remove large, heavy blooms that will flop and bend the stems? Yes, definitely. My hydrangea paniculata, they were using white wedding hydrangea as an example of that. Probably a good call. I've got that little thin, strappy growth on our hydrangea paniculata tree form over there, and the blooms are this big on it. And you know, if it's in danger from wind or rain or something like that, causing damage to it, it probably is best to get rid of them that first or second year until the plant's sturdy enough to hold them up. The next question I may not be able to help a whole lot with, but I'll try to give a little bit of advice here. They were in the Palisades, and in that fire in the Pacific Palisades there in California, they took some fire damage. Their shady town is now lots of sun now, and they've got weeds coming in very quickly, invasives taking their place. I talked about this garden here, and you know, no comparison to what they had going on, other than when you have bare space and opportunity, these invasive plants can then really take over and take advantage. That's why I like having this mulch cap down, which kind of prevents some receding well, but it does at least prevent some of these invasives from coming in. But they've got a clean slate, and so all the invasives like Scotch broom can take over really, really quickly. Some of the grasses like miscanthus and pampas grass and some of the other things that have been fuel for some of those western fires that are actually invasive plants can take over pretty quickly. Interestingly, we were in mid-November, we were at an RV park in Malibu for a couple days, and we went down to Will Rogers State Park down by the Palisades, just below the Palisades there. And we went through the Malibu Canyon Road, but where Pepperdine is, up the Pacific Coast Highway from the Palisades. And it was, you could just see how much fuel there was. Within, I think it was like 3 weeks after we left is when that first Malibu fire happened. I think it was about 3 weeks after that, right at the beginning of January, when the Palisades fire happened, and then another Malibu fire happened. We could see it. The mountains through there were so thick with invasive Scotch broom and grasses and other things. The wind, you know, those dry winds. It wasn't surprising when we left, but it was super, obviously, incredibly sad. I mean, such beautiful places there along the coast. But they've got some trees left. What can they do to keep the broom in check? So I think this is a conversation to be had in your area with extension office, maybe in your area with whatever state university is in your area. I think everybody's going to have to think together on this to, you know, to make sure that these invasive plants that led to, you know, a lot of the fuel for this fire, for these fires, you know, to how to keep them from coming back. I don't know if you put down a mulch cap like I do here. You know, I don't know if that's the right answer for you. I don't want to answer this question because I don't feel comfortable giving advice on something that I just really don't know. I think that this is a conversation for folks in your area, though, that need to be having about how to prevent these, you know, any kind of repeat of some of these invasive things that added to the fuel from coming back. And, you know, what a beautiful place. We hope to get back out there the beginning of next year in that area up there, just kind of north of anywhere kind of north of Los Angeles there on the Pacific Coast Highway from the Palisades, just north of the airport, really, along there, you know, and all the way up the coast, you know, and even inland there, you know, in where all our food is grown out in the valleys. It's such a beautiful, beautiful part of this country. Griffin just decided to contribute to the video, but I just don't, again, I don't feel comfortable answering that. But what we do as a strategy here in our Raleigh, North Carolina garden is we have a mulch cap here to try to prevent that seed from germinating. Okay, number 13. Concerns several plants are declining and decreasing in size. Spider's web fatsia, Alice oakleaf hydrangea. Concerned it might be voles. How can vole activity be identified? I don't think voles are going to shrink the size of your plants. What they're going to do is you're going to see wilting. Sometimes you'll see perennials just disappear under the ground. But typically you'll see plants with root damage like this. They'll experience some sort of wilting or losing old leaves. It'll be as if they're dry. So they're damaging roots, and now the plant can no longer get water or nutrients up into the top of the plant readily. And so you'll see, I had a 20-foot tall little gem magnolia at the old house. And one day I went over, I'm looking at it, and it's dropping 50% of the leaves. And I go over and shake it, and it's loose in the ground where voles had actually been chewing on the roots of a very mature magnolia. But that's how I recognized it. I recognized it from basically wilting type condition, you know, like it's super, super dry outside. I got somebody on a scooter over there. That's what Griffin was actually barking at. I think if your plants are getting smaller, typically that's more of a sign of they're planted a little too deep. Something's going on with them that is, my hosta gets smaller along that back line back there year over year because it's just dry. It's just, they're not sited in a spot that they're actually fond of. They're gotten better over 2 or 3 years. I didn't move any of them. They've gotten better over 2 or 3 years as they've actually rooted in a little more and they've come back fuller. My hosta that are in more moist areas, there's one behind the camera back there. It's this wide. You guys will have seen a hosta video yesterday as you're watching this. I got some of them that are as big, the ones that are in more moist, slightly more moist conditions. And so I would think, are they sited correctly? It may be a good idea to dig them up and plant them a little higher. But that's usually the case when plants are just feel like they're kind of shrinking in place. They're probably on the dry side potentially, or planted too deep, some of those kinds of things. So somebody planted a Cuba and then they dropped the bottom 18 inches of the leaves, 18 inches of leaves. Otherwise they're healthy. They're in the shade, they're planted well. Any advice? After they're in the ground for a little while and start putting on some top growth, you can shear the top off of them a little bit, and that'll encourage some growth down in the bottom of them to re-leaf out. Again, when you lose old foliage down at the bottom of the plant, usually that's a sign that they're dry for whatever reason. When we lose old foliage, think of it as they're dry in some way. When we see the damage though up on the newest growth like this, typically that's some sort of nutrient deficiency being caused by potentially overwatering. The plant's not able to get the nutrients it needs to do the processes that it's doing, you know, turning sun into sugar. So there you go. Let's see. Are there any barks that I wouldn't recommend? In the Pacific Northwest, they have access to fir and hemlock mulch. I think either one of them would be good. I think fir breaks down a little bit better overall. When I see descriptions of hemlock mulch, I always see long lasting. I don't want long lasting mulch. That's not what I'm actually trying to achieve here in this garden. I'm actually wanting mulch that breaks down. Some people are wanting long lasting mulch. That's how you end up with rubber mulch and all kinds of other, all kinds of other mulches that people use because they don't ever want to do it again. It's an experience that they had that they don't ever want to do. I understand that. But for me, I'm actually wanting that mulch to break down and be part of, I'm recreating the forest floor, and I want that to be part of the engine of this garden. So I want a mulch that breaks down. I got soil test specifics, question marks, how to take it. Okay, multiple areas of the landscape. Should they get a kit, send it off to a lab, one of the Amazon kits, whatever. If you have access to your extension office, they should have boxes that you can collect soil samples in, and you can have one of the state labs do it. They'll put you in order. If farmers are putting a lot of samples in at that time, it may take a little longer. Sometimes it's super fast and sometimes not quite as long. Or again, a lot of these mail off labs I'm sure are great as well. In terms of how many samples you would take, this garden has a pretty similar soil front to back, okay? Except until I get to the very back there, and it's quite sandy for some reason across a piece right across the very back there. There's something different about that soil. So if I was gonna go back, as much as I've learned about this place, I don't think I'd take a different sample from the front garden all the way to the middle of the back garden. But from there back, I might want a second sample. I'm just seeing a difference in the soil between the two of them. And so I'm guessing there probably is then potentially chemistry differences in the soil as well. So that's the way I would probably divide it up. But you can, if you want to, do a front sample, side sample, back sample. If you have an area that stays a little wetter than other areas, you may want to take a separate sample from that. But typically, that's how I do it. I've got I can use that Pro Plugger tool that people use to move sod and transplant, take little pieces of their sod, their Bermuda sod or zoysia or whatever, and plug it into other places. The tool can be used for a lot of things, digging holes, but it's pretty good for taking soil test material as well. But just you'll read on the side of the box. If you get one of those boxes from your state lab, from your extension agent, then it'll say on the side how deep to dig down. How many samples you take, again, I might do by soil type in your garden if it changes in different places. Let's see. This person moved to a South Carolina house where there's lots of spraying occurred. They want to have edible landscape. Will soil test tell me toxic chemicals in my soil? So no, that type of soil test that this person's talking about is just going to tell you nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, boron, magnesium, manganese, all the, elements that these plants need, all the nutrients these plants need to live, okay? And it's going to probably tell you pH, maybe a couple of other things depending on the soil test that you're getting back that'll be in there, but it's not going to tell you anything about toxic chemicals. There are labs you can send soil off to. So if you have some suspicion that you have some toxicity in your soil and you don't want to be eating the things out of it, you need to use a different type of lab. And you just have to Google that and figure out how to do those samples to send off. But they said they've planted tons of pollinator plants with no pollinators. And they said, is my soil doomed? I don't think your soil, who knows? I don't think your soil's doomed in all likelihood. I wouldn't worry about planting pollinator plants and not getting pollinators initially. It really takes a lot of people to bring in pollinators, to kind of we have a ton of plants in this garden, but I think I also need my neighbors to have some flowering things too, to really offer up a big buffet for lots of things to be able to live in this neighborhood where these bees and butterflies and hummingbirds and everything can live here. They can't all live in this garden. You know, they need other places. And so it takes a minute sometimes to get pollinators. So just keep that in mind. But in terms, if you think you have a toxicity issue in your soil, those things can be tested for. Number 18, if we could put any shade tree in the front yard, what would we use? Steph said a cladastris or a yellowwood. I love them as well, but I would probably, if we had enough room out there, I'd probably put one of these white oaks or pin oaks, or maybe not a red oak, or a lot of those red oaks went down during Hurricane Fran. They seem to be slightly shallower rooted than some of the others. We do have one of those white oaks right on the property line back here, and it's absolutely dominant over this space. But as you will see, again, I'm referencing tomorrow's video. We talk about a lot of these trees have been coming down in the neighborhood. These older oaks that were planted here, they're now 80 to 90 years old. With the houses being bought and scraped out and larger houses going in, some of the lots they take them down then. Some of them have aged out. You know, there seems to be a lifespan, but I would love to see some of these oaks going back in the neighborhood. Again, we have one that just completely dominates this space back here, keeps the garden cooler, and you know, such a great feature. I literally can't look in any direction out from this garden and not see a giant oak. And they're the life source for a lot of different species. Okay, so this person has, well, they want advice. They have a 20 by 15 garden area they're creating in a Bermuda lawn. They put down some landscape fabric temporarily to kill it. Will it always invade? Yes, it will always invade, that's for sure. And we see it all over the neighborhood. People put in beautiful little garden things they cut out in their Bermuda grass, and then you see it creeping in there almost immediately. I don't think you need a raised mound or raised beds. I think what you need is some sort of defendable edge. So you can take a 2x6, you know, and put it sideways in the ground. You can take bricks and do some sort of mortared brick, or if you do an unmortared brick, Bermuda grass will just go right between the gaps between it. You can use whatever stone. You need some defendable space between you and that vegetable garden. So if you go on vacation for a week or whatever, when you come back, the problem is a lot of these beds, the plants are right up against the bed edge with the Bermuda grass. And as soon as the Bermuda grass is in there, now it's problematic. It's already in the plant. So just leave the defendable space so that you can leave for a week or two and not have it immediately be problematic. But that's the only way to deal with it. But yes, it will always try to creep in there. But I am a big fan of you improving your own soil and planting food, whatever you're doing in your own soil. It's just sometimes in the short term, planting vegetables, planting these plants in the ground is not going to be the easiest, or they're not going to be the best initially. But if you keep working at the soil, your soil can become the best place to grow nutrient dense food and the best plants in the ground. Whereas raised beds, raised containers are going to require you to readdress them occasionally for various reasons. Okay. So this person has an acre lot in Connecticut, and their dog runs around the perimeter. They've been compacting the soil and killing the grass, and spurring weeds. Can they stab the grass with a pitchfork? Is there any way to alleviate the issue? So you could take a heavy fork with heavy tines on it, and you can actually put it in there and pull back on it and actually loosen some of that compaction if you wanted to. For us, we have all of our garden paths are done with wood chips, and initially, when it's loose material, the dogs didn't like to walk on it as much. But once it's flattened down and pressed down, the Griffin loves to run these circles right here around around these wood chip paths. So you might consider putting a wood chip trail basically around it. That worked pretty well for us in this garden. And it's helping the plants too. Even your lawn, being able to get that moisture that's under those wood chips would probably be helpful. So somebody said they have withering canes on their knockout roses. It doesn't look like rosette canes dying one at the time. Is it best to get rid of the plant? It sounds like how rosette kind of kills the plants, but if you don't think it is, I don't know what's happening there, but it probably is best to remove plants that are dying, you know, one branch at the time, kind of diseased looking things, and make sure you're not pruning one with pruners and then pruning another one, especially with if it's potentially rosette. This person in central Oklahoma has extensive gardens affected by dust storms, seem to be being decimated by spider mites now. Please help. Yeah, stressed plants are what gets spider mites. And, you know, I always say that as a, you know, that's the thing with spider mites. We had lots of spider mites, not lots, but we have spider mites in a nursery situation on plants where we don't necessarily have them on the ground, with plants in the ground, because in a nursery situation, we were hammering away at the fertilizer, hammering away at the water, trying to get them to grow as fast as possible, constantly putting them in a kind of an unnatural state of growth, because I prune it to make it grow again. I fertilize it to make it grow again. I want that plant finished as fast as possible. Made them extremely vulnerable to spider mites. So similar kind of situation here. You're getting dust storms, you're getting cold, you're getting hot, you're getting dry, you got clay-based soil that some of these plants may not be necessarily familiar with, you know, wherever they evolved, lots of different things like that. So I don't know how to help on this question other than, you know, are the plants that you're using best suited for the extremes of Oklahoma, you know, for the wind and the wind and the rain and the, you know, and the clay and all the other, and the hot, the high temperatures and the low temperatures and a lot of the extremes that some of Oklahoma gardens go through. You know, that's a question for you. Is it mulched well? Are you keeping it evenly moist, you know, without it being drowned? So all of those questions. But yes, you have put two pieces together for sure. The stresses that those plants have been under are the likely cause of lots of the spider mite problems you're having in the ground. I can take this gardenia, there's all frame over here. I got a gardenia over here. I can take that plant and grow it in the ground out here perfectly. October, I could dig it up, put it in a pot and bring it in the house where there's slightly lower light and get mites almost immediately, spider mites almost immediately on that plant. It's just, I'm taking it out of optimal conditions. I'm stressing it out in lower light in the house, and boom, just like that. You'll see things like problems like that arise. So last couple for this week, does pH change the color of calla lilies? No, there's a calla lily right here. I don't think you can see. It was loaded with white flowers earlier. We have a pink flowering one over there, but they are not pH sensitive like hydrangeas are. Hydrangeas are pH sensitive and aluminum sensitive, where aluminum can create this blue color as long as the pH is low enough. But callas are not sensitive to changing colors like that. Do grubs or Japanese beetles offer any benefits to gardens? They've been killing them every year. Just wondered if there was any benefits. Well, the grubs are eaten by some birds, and some birds will eat the actual beetles, not as many as we would hope. They don't seem to find them all that appealing overall, but there are some birds that will eat them, and more so in the grub stage when they're down in the ground. But overall, it's an invasive species. It's destroying the roots on our grass in the winter time and in the early spring, and then coming out and munching our plants down, and you know, when they come out. So I don't know that there's a heck of a lot of benefit other than, again, a few birds have figured out to take advantage of it, of the situation in the grub stage or in the beetle stage. And their young are probably living, you know, overall better because they're choosing to eat them. But I don't know that there's any actual benefit. So we have an extended list of questions from last week's as well that we've already started on for this next week, so that we can jump ahead a little bit filming them. So I've got I think about 11 or 12 questions already. So go ahead and ask your questions sooner than later. If you have them, we'll pick from those tomorrow as you're watching this, and I'm going to get that filmed and up pretty quickly. Again, look forward to seeing everybody here in 2 weeks. I have one more Q&A before the open garden, and any questions you have about the open garden, you can ask those down below too, and I'll try to answer those at the beginning of next week's Q&A as well. Thanks for watching.